Hello, you wonderful people. In this video, we're going to take a look how to build your first Strapi 5 plugin. Why should you consider building plugins with Strapi anyway? Because it allows you to add additional functionality to your Strapi application, or if you want to have an easier way to create an endpoint that you can either make public or only make authenticated users to be able to use it. If you've never done Strapi is a headless CMS that allows you to create an API in minutes. Literally, you are able to set this up in 2 minutes with one simple command, and that way you have an amazing admin area where you're able to add your content and expose it via endpoints, like you could see here on the screen. Even though you could get started really easy, it is highly customizable. Because it's based on Node.js, you are able to add additional functionality if you want to via plugins. And in today's video, we're going to take a look how we could create an endpoint for our Strapi application to be able to take a YouTube video ID and return the transcript. So let's see it in action. So here I have a video. I'm working on this tutorial. We are building a YouTube video summarizer using Next.js. And more importantly, we need this feature of being able to get the YouTube video transcript easily. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. So here you could see that I have the video ID. I'm going to go ahead and copy it. And in the backend of my application, I have this endpoint, and I purposely passed the wrong ID just to see that it will return an error if the ID is not correct. But if we pass the video ID that I copied, it's going to go ahead and give us the transcript, which is awesome because then you could do whatever you like with this transcript. You could summarize it, you could rewrite it. The possibilities are limitless. And now we have an endpoint that allows it to do this. And even though this is publicly available right now, anybody could hit it. What's cool with Strapi, you are able to actually hide this endpoint and protect it where you need to be logged in or have a API token to be able to use this endpoint, which we're going to cover in this tutorial. So let's start by building our plugin, and the easiest way, we're going to start with our Strapi application first. I'm going to go ahead and copy this command, npx create Strapi app at latest, and I already have my terminal open. I'm going to go ahead and paste it in. This is going to ask some follow-up questions. For instance, what is the name of our project? We're going to just call it YT Transcript, whatever you like to call it, you can. And it's going to ask us if you want to try Strapi Cloud 14 days free. We don't have to do this right now, even though it's pretty awesome. And let's walk through these settings. Yes, we want to use SQLite default database. No for the structured data example. Start with TypeScript. Of course, we're going to do some TypeScript install dependencies with npm. Yes. And do we want to initialize the Git repository? Sure. Why not? This is going to go ahead and start your Strapi project. By the way, while this is loading, I already have a repo that we're going to use to get the code snippets, so you don't have to watch me type everything. So I'm going to go ahead and get it ready, but I am going to give you an overview of everything we need to know. But this also has a good README file that you could use as reference when following this video. And of course, I'm going to link it in the description below. Now that Strapi has installed, we could do ls to see the folder where our Strapi application was created, and I'm going to cd into it, and we're going to run yarn develop to start Strapi. And let's go ahead and create our first admin user. So Strapi starts here. I am going to create my first account, Paul Bratz, and let's start. And here you're going to be greeted with the Strapi admin area. I'm in the process of creating more tutorials on how to use Strapi, but if you're interested to learn the basics of Strapi, subscribe to this channel because I do many lessons because I'm a big fan of Strapi because I love it. And I also work there. I guess that helps. But if we take a look here in our settings, we're going to take a look at this plugins, which shows all the current plugins that are installed. We have Strapi Cloud and roles and permissions. So let's take a look how we could create our first plugin for Strapi 5. And to help us with this, we're going to use Strapi's plugin CLI tool. You could Google Strapi SDK plugin, and it's going to go ahead and take you to this repo. You could read the README of how to use it. In our case, to get started, all we need to do is call this command following the name of the plugin. So here in my terminal, I'm going to go ahead and paste it. And we're going to give it a very original name called Get YT Transcript Plugin and click enter. This is going to go ahead and ask us some questions. Since we did not commit anything to Git yet, we could save this blank and update it later. And the plugin name, Get YT Transcript Plugin, makes sense. Plugin display name, I'm just going to say Get YT Transcript. Click enter. Plugin description will get the transcript for YT video. I mean, I don't know how much more I could say here. Plugin author name, you could give your name, whatever. Plugin's author email, paul.bratzlavsky@strapi.io. And plugin license MIT, yes, register with admin panel. So we're not going to do anything in Strapi's admin because we want to create an endpoint. I'm going to click no here. And register with the server, yes, because we are creating an endpoint in Strapi that will allow us to do this. We're going to say yes, and use editing config, yes. ESLint, why not? Prettier, of course. Use TypeScript, yes for TypeScript. Yes, yes, yes. And this is going to go ahead and create our plugin. Once our plugin is installed, we're going to have this helpful message that says, please update plugins.ts file inside the config folder by adding this little snippet. So this is what we're going to do first. So I'm going to open my project in VS Code. We're going to give it a nice pretty color. This pretty blue works for me. And navigate to config, plugins, and let's go ahead and paste in that code. Let's remove these unnecessary comments. Now here in VS Code, I'm going to open two tabs, one to run the Strapi project, and the other one is going to be for where our plugin is found. So we're going to cd into source, plugins, ls. You see that we have our Get YT Transcript plugin. So let's cd inside that folder. And let's first run yarn to install all the dependencies. And if you're wondering, inside our Strapi folder here, this is where our plugins live, inside source, under plugins, and you see our plugin that we have here. Once all the dependencies are installed, let's run yarn build because we are using TypeScript. After all the dependencies are installed, we are going to run yarn build because we are using TypeScript. And once we build our plugin, we could run it in yarn watch to be able to work on it in real time without needing to rebuild it each time. So now inside our Strapi root, I'm going to restart our Strapi project by running yarn develop. And now when we navigate back into our Strapi application, going back to our plugins tab, you notice that we have Get YT Transcript plugin. So let's quickly do a quick walkthrough through the code. Once our plugin was created, we have our dist folder. This is where all of our build files will go to. And the most important folder for us to keep in mind is this server folder. If we take a look, we'll have our source folder, and there are many different files here, but for the purposes of this beginner tutorial, we're going to talk about, we have our routes. Our routes is our endpoint that we're going to hit when we're making a call to our plugin. And that endpoint is going to trigger a controller. And this is why we have it here. So next, let's take a look at our controller folder. Here inside our controller folder, we have our controller code. And currently it is calling a generic service that has been created for us automatically. So whenever someone calls our endpoint, it's going to hit our route, then it's going to trigger our controller, and our controller is going to run our service. So now let's take a look at the service here. Once we hit that endpoint, we're going to see our welcome to Strapi message. Taking a look at our routes file one more time, we notice that if we hit the root folder of our plugin, we should be able to fire this controller and see our service. So let's test it out. So if we go to localhost, get YT transcript plugin, and click enter, we are going to get that you are unauthorized because at the moment we actually hitting the admin route that's not exposed to the public. So let's update our plugin to allow us to get access to our controller via public API. And before we make changes here, I just want to show you one quick thing here in Strapi. If we take a look in our Strapi application and we go to our users permission roles, we take a look here under public. Notice how we don't see our plugin being displayed here. So what we want to do is give our users the ability to say, do they want the endpoint to be publicly available, or do they want to make it behind an authenticated endpoint where you have to be authenticated user, or you could even create a specific API token where you could select our plugin endpoint and be able to get access to it via specific token. But notice that it's not showing up as any of these options. So in order to tell Strapi that we wanted to show up as a content API endpoint, we need to update our routes. Before showing you the right way of doing it, you can just make this public by saying auth equals false, and it's going to work. But I think we want to have the flexibility to allow the users to be able to give the permission from the admin panel. So let's go ahead and see how we could do that. I'm going to go ahead and cut this generic code out. And inside the routes folder here, we're going to create a new file. We're going to call it admin.ts, and we're going to paste in that route. And more importantly, we're going to create a new route here called content API.ts. And this is going to be our external available endpoint that we're going to use. And for now, I'm just going to paste in that generic code. Now that we have our admin route and content route, we want to make sure that we export both those routes for Strapi to use. So inside the index.ts file, we are going to export those routes. So here I'm referencing our content API routes that we have, which is going to be our publicly exposed routes. And then we also have our admin routes, just in case you want to use that same functionality of getting a transcript internally to Strapi. And we're going to export those two routes. We're going to say one is going to be our content API route. This is something that we're going to expose publicly, regardless if it uses authenticated requests or not. And we have both our admin if we want to add any future functionality to this application. And again, because I'm running my watch command, this should have automatically rebuilt everything. So back in our Strapi application, if we go back to settings again, and we go to users permission and roles, and we take a look at public, you're going to see that we now have this extra option, get YT transcript plugin, which shows us our standard route to which where we could make a get request at API get YT transcript. Let me copy this for now. And we're going to see that same welcome message that we saw before. So if I click save to give it public permission, and I'm going to go ahead and make that get request to our public endpoint. And again, notice that we're getting this welcome message. And to quickly recap, when we're making a get request to our Strapi application, it is going ahead and hitting our content API route that's triggering our index controller found inside our controller folder. Our controller is triggering our service, which is found in our services folder that is displaying this welcome message. Now that we know this works, let's go ahead and update the service to be able to get our YouTube transcript. To prevent me from typing everything slowly, we are going to go into the repo that's in the description below, click on services, index.ts, and select the services.ts file. And don't mind the squigglies. We're going to go ahead and copy this code. And inside the VS Code, I'm going to go ahead, paste it in, and we'll walk through it. So let's take a look. We have a fetch transcript function here, which is utilizing YouTube.js library, which we need to add. And what we're doing here is we're using the YouTube.js library to make a fetch request to get our YouTube transcript. You could learn more about it by looking it up in NPM, which will show you all the different use cases and how to use it with examples. But in our case, I already provided it here in this code snippet. But the first thing we want to do, we want to make sure that we install it via yarn add and the name of the NPM package. Once this is installed, we're going to run yarn build And then we could run yarn watch again, yarn watch, to make sure that everything is being updated in real time. And now when we take a look, we could see that it's only complaining about my spelling, which is perfectly fine. And now that we have our fetch transcript function here I have get YouTube transcript, which basically takes in the video URL. It is removing the video ID and we're passing the video ID to our fetch transcript. And then finally, we have our get YouTube transcript service. And what this takes, it takes the video ID as a parameter. We're using regex to check if it's a valid video ID. If not, it's gonna go ahead and throw this error. And then we're constructing our basic URL that we're gonna pass into our get YouTube transcript function. And as everything succeeds, we're going to return our transcript. So now that we know that we have the service, we need to now make sure that we're calling this service from our controller. So navigating to our controller folder on the controller.ts file, here we could see that currently we're calling our generic service that we had, but instead we now want to call the service that we just created. So in going back to my example, I'm going to go ahead and copy the snippet, which you'll be able to do as well. And I'm going to paste it in here. And basically all we're doing, nothing changed. We have our get your YouTube transcript controller, and it is calling our get YouTube transcript service that we just created. And finally, the last thing that we have to do now that our controller is updated, we need to go into our routes folder and go into our content API controller. And let's update our route to use our new controller that we just created. And again, so I don't have to retype everything again, I'm going to go ahead and copy my snippet and paste it in. And basically, we're saying the method is get, the endpoint is YT transcript. It expects a video ID. And we're calling our get YouTube transcript controller. That controller is going to go ahead and call our get YouTube transcript service. And that service is going to go ahead and do the bulk of the heavy lifting, actually get the transcript. Now that everything is all set, let's check it out in Strapi. And before we do that, make sure you have Strapi running by running yarn develop. And it's complaining handler not found, and I know why this is. And this is because we updated our controller and service. So what we're going to do here is go back into your routes folder, go to content.api.ts, where we updated our content API public route. We want to make sure that we make same changes to our internal admin route as well. So we are actually not referencing things that don't exist anymore. And let's try this again. Run yarn develop, and fingers crossed, and nothing blew up yet. So restarting our Strapi application, now we're able to go into settings and we're able to go to roles. And now we have this public access where we have our get YT transcript plugin. Now we have our new route that we're using to get our transcript. I'm going to enable it. And if I scroll up a little bit, and I'm too zoomed in, but you're going to see that we have our new endpoint that we're able to hit. So I'm going to click save. Inside my VS Code, I have a Postman plugin installed. So we're going to make a new HTTP request. It's going to be get request, and we're going to call our local instance of Strapi at HTTP localhost 1337, and of course, pass our endpoint that we created. And this endpoint expects YouTube video ID. So let me go ahead to YouTube's, look up Coding Face. Joe is super awesome. Go check out his channel. If you haven't checked out his website, Coding Face, check it out. But he just recently shared one of my videos. And if we want to get the transcript, let's go ahead and copy the ID. Click copy. Let's go back to VS Code, add our ID, and click send. And notice we are getting our transcript. But here's the powerful part. Now that we have our plugin inside Strapi, we are able to use the user's permissioning to either make it public, authenticate it, or use a API token. So now you could lock down your endpoint and only allow authenticated users to have access to it. So back in my Strapi application, if I go ahead and disable public access and click save, if I try to resend, we're going to say, hey, forbidden. But now what we could do, we could go to roles and we could say, hey, we want to make an authenticated request, meaning the user has to be logged in, which works very similar. If I go here, I select the endpoint, give the permissions, or we could actually create a specific token just for this endpoint that you want to give others. And that's what I'm going to show here as well. So we could go to API tokens and we could say, hey, we need to have this specific API token to make a call to this endpoint. Maybe you have another application like the Next.js application we're building that's going to be able to do this. And I'm going to say get transcript, and we're going to say we want to create a token type custom. And we're going to say it's unlimited at the moment. And I'm just going to scroll down to get a transcript plugin, click on the checkbox and click save. Now make sure you copy the token. And now in our Postman, if I try to send this request as many times as I want to, it's going to say it's forbidden. But if I pass an authorization token, we're going to say bearer token. Let's paste our token and click send. Notice that we get our transcript back via the authenticated request, which is pretty awesome. So as a quick review, in this video, we took a look how to build our first Strapi 5 plugin. The most important things to remember, we use Strapi SDK CLI to initiate our plugin, which created this plugin inside the plugins folder. And the most important thing to remember, today we took a look at how to make just the backend portion of it, creating an API. You could also make front end part of that plugin that could show inside your Strapi admin. But for our use case, we focused on the basics. So inside the server file, the first thing we needed to do is we needed to create our routes. We created our content API route to expose our routes to a public access endpoint, which either could be public or authenticated. Inside here, we called a controller, which we created a controller that went ahead and called our service. And our service is what was responsible for handling all of the logic that gets the transcript. So if you're brand new to building plugins, I felt like this was a very nice way to get started and learn the basics. Whenever you're creating a backend endpoint, there's three pieces of it. You have your route, you have your controller, and you have your service. And so I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. This was just the basics of introducing plugin development. I'll do more on plugin development here on this channel. There's a lot of cool stuff you could do. But with that being said, thank you so much for watching. And if you haven't subscribed, you don't have to. If you didn't like or disliked, who cares? I just want to make these videos for those of you who do enjoy them. So wherever you are and the time you took to stop by to say hello, thank you so much. I really appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next one.